Good morning for me. Good afternoon for you, Matt. My name is Michelle Hodges, Senior Vice President of Global Channels and Alliances here at Ivanti. And this is our next series, or our next edition in the Partner Insight series, where I get the good fortune to sit down with my friends and colleagues in the business and talk about what makes our partnerships work and what makes them special. And so today I'm super excited to be joined by Matt Piddington, one of our strong partners, Westcon, across all of EMEA, who looks after their services organization, VP of Services. Hi, Matt. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi. Well, I think you've done it for me, Michelle. Matt Piddington, VP of Services in Europe for Westcon. So excited to be here. Thank you, Michelle, for the opportunity, and delighted to have a chat with you today about everything services.
Oh, my pleasure. First of all, I must say happy Friday. Thank you for spending the time with me. I'm likely your last call between you and the weekend, so thanks for that.
Last but best, Michelle. That's what I'd say.
All right. Today we're going to be talking about, the title is Building a Services Program, but I really want to frame around the idea of the customer, right? Ultimately, we are on technology to create amazing outcomes and solutions for our customers, and services is a key part of that. And I think some in the audience are going to ask, why are you talking to a distributor about services?
Yeah.
And so I'd really like to frame our conversation in that concept of customer success and customer lifecycle and why services are so important. What is it that you value and why you think Westcon's an important part of that? And I'll add on to it because I've got my own answer, but I want you to respond first.
So I think when you talk about distribution, the landscape is changing quite significantly. And when you talk about the customer, the natural answer for me is the customer is the partner that then serves the end customer. But for me, the vendor is also a customer. And of course, the endpoint, the user of the technology, is a customer as well. And as we think about the role of distribution, we're thinking about how we serve all of those interfaces. So what we really bring to the table for all parties is scale and reach. And what we're constantly thinking about is, we're a big advocate of TSIA's A-player model. We're constantly thinking about what we're doing with technology to drive adoption. And when you think about customer success, that's about how are you maintaining your relationship ultimately with the end customer, but also in our case, the partner. And how are you looking for those opportunities to grow the lifecycle approach in terms of expansion, tech refresh, ultimately leading for incremental value for all. But fundamentally, we need to recognize the main objective for all of us in the channel is to make sure that that end customer is really enjoying the benefits of the technology that they're buying into. And I think that's been a challenge for our sector as a whole, Michelle. I continue to read these horrible statistics around IT project failure, digital transformation failure. And there's a key theme when you think about that is it's not the technology's fault. It's often a people element. And I remember Daniel talking to you about the importance of people in our business. But I think when it comes to services, it's absolutely crucial. How do we ensure that we've got skilled capability throughout the channel to make sure that our customers, ultimately the end customer, is recognizing the ROI of their investments that they're making? And most importantly, it's allowing them to execute on their organizational strategy. And too often, I think sometimes we miss that approach, all of us in the channel. So our commitment is, how do we make sure that we're listening to the market? We're undertaking a services proposition that really helps drive that adoption through the channel in a scalable and cost-effective manner.
Yeah. So you mentioned TSIA, which means you likely subscribe to the same sentiment around customer success and customer lifecycle that talks about a customer lifecycle model that, really never ends, right? It starts at evaluation, through the purchase, through the usage, advocacy, growth, adoption, and so on. How does that idea of a never-ending customer lifecycle help you identify and create services and constant improvement to the services that you offer?
So first of all, we take the A-player model. We look at the various elements and we look at what services are needed in each area of that capability. Now, the simple way would be to look at that post and pre-sale. So if you talk about services that are needed in the channel, Well, pre-sales capabilities that we can introduce to the partner to make sure we're truly understanding the need of the end customer and aligning a solution that's fit for purpose, that's absolutely crucial. What we're also heavily investing in, which is unusual for a distributor, is data services. So how do we make sure that we're using our data capability with all of the information that we've got access to and making that available both to the vendor and the partner to better inform their decision-making process? How do we make sure the data is in front of the right people at the right time of the life cycle to drive the right engagement through the channel through to the end customer? So that's where I would talk about investment in services, but there's a huge piece around enablement, and I'll come on to talk about education services later. But fundamentally, when you look at post, there's a combination of services that we're investing in as a distributor. You've got the traditional, early maturity support services, managed services, professional services, education services, which are all fundamentally crucial to the marketplace in terms of helping drive customer lifecycle value. But where we're also starting to invest is complementary services. So recently, Westcon, you may or may not be aware, Michelle, that we acquired a company called Rubura, who are a migration partner for AWS, because one of the challenges that we see in the marketplace is organizations moving from on-prem to off-prem and how they support their vendor portfolios in that space. So having a complementary business that sits within our company umbrella and is aligned to some of the hyperscaler movement that we're seeing in the market is also really important. And then you have commercial services that come into play. So the movement of hyperscalers is well documented, and that comes as both a threat and an opportunity in the marketplace for the channel, also for the vendor. So what we're also very, very active with is we're a member of the AWS DSOR program. So what we're trying to do is really disrupt the traditional distribution thinking. And many people that are probably listening to this podcast will be thinking the role of the distributor is to ship stuff, right? To ship it really effectively from one country to another and take the pain away from that engagement. Well, Michelle, I represent a business where 82% of our business is intangible business. The hardware business within Westcon is very, very limited. So we've had to disrupt. We've had to think about customer success, driving adoption, and we have to think about how we often reach both to the vendor and the partner, because those scaled individuals in the marketplace are very few and far between. We all know the challenge around skills gaps in the technology sector. But I think our partners are also recognizing the value that comes for services as well. Partners are typically seeing huge amounts of value in their services wrapper around selling the technology to make sure they remain relevant to the end customer. I would argue that in some of our spaces, like cybersecurity, the vendor the end customer isn't thinking about the technology brand that they're using. They're thinking about the use case that they need to deploy to keep their organization protected. And actually what they're really looking for is for the channel to make sure that they execute against that outcome they're looking for. And that's where our pre-sales teams and skilled individuals are required to make sure that we're making the right decisions at the right time and we're offering that value through the channel.
I want to get on to enablement and certification real quick, but I do want to put some context and frame and just a use case around some of the things you're mentioning about distribution. When I have to educate folks about the role of distribution in today's market, some of the part of what you said, people just don't assume. But when you say data, you have decades of experience and purchasing behavior and outcomes across channel partners and customers of what type of technology they've invested in and so on. And the modeling that you present around that is very useful for us to understand how we make investments as we go forward. And on that post side, I need to remind the audience, we've got 40,000 customers. There's absolutely no way that we can deliver that customer success that we were describing earlier without the help of a partner who can provide us that reach, who has those relationships, with the channel partners and ultimately the customers as well. So just wanted to frame that a little bit for the audience. I don't know that people understand how much the channel has evolved over the last 10, 15 years.
And I'd agree. I think whilst we've got this great capability from a services proposition, one of the things we find is it's almost our best kept secret, and we need to be better. The area of improvement for us is building that trust with the partners to allow us to touch their end customer and involve us in the opportunity, but also making sure the vendors know about that capability. And I was in a conference just last week when they stood up on stage, the vendor, and said, we're really proud in the capabilities that our distributors in the market are investing in to offer cost-effective solutions to give reach into the market. And that really stuck with me.
And the reality is with those 40,000 customers, right, I cannot possibly hire enough people, or we cannot possibly hire enough people to renew, much less refresh, migrate, add value, innovate. And so we're really grateful for your partnership around that.
Yeah, and that's the largest area of my services capability is our centralized renewals team. So we really buy into focused resources, the right people taking on board the right activity at the right time and place. And we at Westcon, we have a centralized renewals capability where they are actively working 90 days in advance as a minimum, but they're also trying to drive that expansion and tech refresh opportunity surrounding that renewals contract database. And that's all about being proactive and making sure the partner and the end customer are informed of the benefits. But also we use that wider services capability to articulate those benefits through to the partner and the end customer. But I think the key there is just making sure that the partner is aware with everything that the partner has on their plate of what's coming down the line from the vendor. And again, with an organization that has the diversity in your portfolio with great capabilities in many, many areas, one of the challenges for anyone in the market is continuing to be educated on the movements and transitions that's taking.
Absolutely.
That's part of our role. How do we make sure that the market is aware?
And if we refer back to that life cycle model, it's the cognizance that the renewal is not a transaction. I think historically, distribution has been great at handling the scale of the transaction, covering risk, managing lists, but it's not about the transaction. It's about the conversion point in that life cycle. And that's the reason that renewals sits in the services organization. And when I come to you with a renewals or a tech refresh proposition, it's treated as a go-to-market initiative, not as a transaction motion.
And I think that's a really interesting point when it comes to software companies, because one of the challenges for us, many of the vendors that we work with in the market, is not only making sure someone's taking ownership around a renewal process, driving tech refresh, expansion, etc., but it's also the basic customer success notion. Most of our vendors do a brilliant job in their tier one customers in terms of driving that active engagement with the end customer. But when you start getting to the smaller, in your case, the 30,000 customers that aren't at critical mass point for you, how do we make sure that someone's having a conversation with them about adoption? How do we make sure someone's checking in to ensure that they're recognizing the functional needs and they're taking advantage of your technology stack? Too often, I feel as if vendors have the opportunity of being displaced because the end customer hasn't been properly educated or isn't aware or isn't even recognizing the value of the technology that they already own. And I think we as a channel have to be better at that. I think the vendor needs to be better at it. The partners need to be better. And I see us having a fundamental critical role in that moving forward. If we can break that, all of these horrible statistics about IT project failure that bug me and keep me awake at night, they'll start to decrease. And that will give more faith that when an investment is made, they're seeing a positive, impactful return.
Absolutely. So in that vein of being better, I've got one last area of question because we're going to run over because you and I love to chat. But in that vein of being better for the vendors in the audience, how can we be better or best, case in how we help enable and certify your teams to kind of empower and drive this customer lifecycle?
So I think it's about being really open to feedback is the first thing. I think often there's a perception in the market that the vendor can't be challenged. I think, as you know, and I find this with Ivanti, you're a great example of it. You want that feedback. You want
and
to
you
be.
are a great example of a challenger. So.
Because I think that's mutually beneficial. I think our ability then is, how do we make sure the right people in our organization are upskilled well in advance of the need for the upskilling, so we can then be your scalable option into the partners who can then help with the engagement into the end customer. I also think we need to be careful about digital enablement, because my observation is there are so many vendors in certain marketplaces, all with their own digital libraries of content, that it can become noise. And actually what we see, part of our value as a distributor, is partners coming to us and saying, can you remove the noise? Can you build us face-to-face enablement programs that give us the salient points that really allow us to execute in the marketplace? And part of our role is to be the funnel, making sure the right information gets through to the right people so we can really drive transformation in the marketplace. And of course, we need to do that in multiple time zones, multiple geographies, multiple languages, and we need to help you scale that messaging.
Awesome. Thank you for that. Well, I could spend another hour chatting with you. Always a pleasure. Thanks for taking time out of your day to speak with us, Matt. And I'll see you really soon. I think I'll see you next month in Europe.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you so much for having me, Michelle. And thanks to the audience for listening.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Yeah.